Hello. Welcome, everyone. I see lots of people filing in. We're just going to give everyone maybe a minute or two before we get started to come in. So in the meantime, why don't you let us all know where you're coming from in the chat, maybe the name of your organization, so we can get to know everybody a little bit better. Lots of people coming in. Welcome to everybody who's coming. I feel like I can't welcome you fast enough. There's so many people coming in. We've got Susan from the Art Gallery of Sudbury. We were actually just talking about Sudbury. Stephanie, who's on the call today, is also located in Sudbury. We've got representing Action Against Hunger from Toronto. Hello. Oh, we've got Quebec, more Toronto, Calgary, Montreal, so many Canadians. I love to see this. Welcome, everybody. Okay, we're gonna get this show on the road because we've got lots to cover. So first of all, thank you everybody for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here. My name is Meredith. I am Keelabs head of marketing. We also have Stephanie, Keelabs marketing specialist, helping us out today on the tech side of things. So you may see Steph in the chat box or answering some of your technical questions. So feel free to say hello to her. Before we get started, I want to start the session today by acknowledging that Keelabs head office is located in Vancouver, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and give thanks for their generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. If you're new to Keela, welcome. Keela is a donor management and fundraising platform that brings together all of the essential tools and features that fundraisers need to succeed. Keela was also built by fundraisers for fundraisers. I myself was a fundraiser before joining Keela, as were many people on the Keela team, and we have a deep-rooted understanding of the nonprofit sector and have channeled all of that knowledge and experience into creating a platform that caters to your unique needs. So on behalf of everyone at Keela, welcome again. Today's session will be about 35 minutes in length, followed by a Q&A session at the end. So throughout the presentation, please feel free to write any questions that you have in the chat box or in the Q&A, and we will get to as many of them as we can. Speaking of the chat box, please remember to select everyone when you type so that all of our guests today can read your comments and questions. And finally, the webinar is being recorded and you will receive access to the recording before the end of the week. So with all of that kind of wrapped up, I'm really excited to welcome our expert speaker today, Claire Williams. As the Senior Manager of Corporate Citizenship at Imagine Canada, Claire is leading the renewal of the Caring Company program to inspire Canada's biggest companies to embrace deep partnerships with the nonprofit sector and deliver social impact in meaningful and measurable ways. That is just a very small portion of all of the impressive things that Claire has done and is working on, but I'm going to hand it over to Claire and let you take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Meredith. Good morning, everyone, or to some of you, good afternoon. Welcome into this virtual circle. Really great to be part of the ongoing collaboration between Keela and Imagine Canada. Meredith, thanks for the land acknowledgement from the broad city of Vancouver. I'm actually in Kitsilano, which is a neighborhood in Vancouver, and so I am on the unceded ancestral territory of the Squamish Nation. So today, here to talk to you about the future of corporate community investment. I think it's important to say I am not a fortune teller, and in these rapidly changing times, we never know what's coming down the pipeline, but there's definitely some signals, and these are signals that we're seeing in the work that we lead, the conversations that we are having with our corporate partners, as well as the research that both Imagine Canada and other organizations are undertaking. So in terms of flow, I'll start with introducing you to Imagine Canada, speak about some of the services that we offer, as well as our Caring Companies work. And that's what really positions us to speak on this subject. Then we'll look at the needs of corporations in terms of advancing their corporate community investment, as well as the needs of the charitable sector, what you guys are looking for from your corporate partnerships. And then we will move into a conversation around the top 4 trends. Just as a caveat, I will use the term charities and nonprofits interchangeably just for ease of reference. So let's dive in. So Imagine Canada, the best way to think about us is that we are a charity that represents the charitable sector. And we have 4 strategic directions. The first is ensuring our relevance. So using timely, relevant sector data and knowledge when taking action. Then we elevate our excellence, and that's by ensuring that the charitable sector is operating at the highest level of governance and delivering the highest quality programs and ultimately social impact. We also influence our environment. Here in Canada, the nonprofit and charitable sector, it fills in a big gap in our social safety net. And ultimately, we need a permanent home on Parliament Hill. But in the meantime, we are advocating for public policy and funding, legislation, and regulation in support of the sector. And then the last one is energizing our voices. So elevating unique and diverse perspectives, lived experience and expertise of the sector when we speak to the general public, the media, and government. So in terms of our service delivery, we have 3 main focus areas of service delivery. The first is our charity accreditation programs. That's our standards program. And it ultimately helps you showcase your excellence and really attract funding dollars. The second is Grant Connect, which is a database of funding opportunities. There's thousands of funding opportunities. So it allows you to run a query whereby you can put in your mission and programming and then align that with funders who are interested in the same areas. And the last one is the Caring Company program. And that's the program that recognizes companies who are demonstrating a strong commitment to corporate social responsibility and giving back to their communities. And that's really what gives us the authority to speak on this issue today. So the Caring Company program, it was started way back in 1988. And it was started as a pledge program, recognizing companies that gave back at least 1% of their pre-tax profits, giving back in the form of cash donations, paid volunteerism, in-kind contributions, and management costs. And we moved from a pledge-based model to a membership model where folks would pay to be part of the program, and then they could display the Imagine Canada Caring Company Trust Mark, which you may or may not have seen. Some of Canada's biggest companies are caring companies, if you think of Canadian Tire and the Royal Bank, etc. And so over the years, the program has consisted of more companies investing dollars in the sector because they've been inspired by that 1% benchmark. It's resulted in a higher level of funding and more strategic funding efforts. And in 2021, we have 50 companies in the program now, and they've contributed over $700 million to Canadian communities, which is not insignificant. That said, a lot has changed since 1988. We are living in a radically different world with very different priorities. Some would say we are in the age of the perma-crisis. And so naturally, the Caring Companies program needs to evolve to meet the demands of our new reality, as well as the changing needs of both the charitable sector and the business community. So as we are working to evolve forward our Caring Companies program, we have engaged in multiple stakeholder interviews to get a sense of, the value Imagine Canada brings to this space in terms of advancing corporate citizenship. And we spoke with multiple stakeholders to better understand also some of the challenges that our corporate clients are facing in terms of better serving communities and amplifying collective impact. And so some of the things we heard from them when we asked them about, what do you need as we evolve this program and we adapt it to meet your needs and the needs of community, we heard that they're really striving to get internal alignment across their company. So in many cases, the CSR department or the community impact department, it's a niche department. Some folks don't even know it exists. So using this program, the Caring Companies program, as a lily pad or a stepping stone to really start talking about what that organization is doing, that company is doing in terms of corporate community investment. I'm using it as a tool to better communicate with their leadership. So again, quite removed, and the C-suite doesn't necessarily know what an organization is doing in terms of community impact. They also need help to tell better stories about the transformation that they are co-creating with their nonprofit partners. We're seeing also that they want to target their community investment better. So that's moving from just the what, which is the dollars, to the how, and really ensuring that there's values alignment between the corporation and the nonprofits and charities that they're working with. And then naturally, being in business, you want to benchmark. You want to understand where are you at in comparison to peers in your industry. And so as champions of the nonprofit sector, all of you on this webinar, it's really important for you to get visibility on some of these issues, helps you better understand your corporate partners and think strategically about how to align yourself so that your relationship is mutually beneficial. So before I dive into trends, I also want to share a little bit about the perceptions of the charitable and nonprofit sector when it comes to corporate community investment, corporate partnerships, and funding. So in early April, Imagine deployed a survey to 1,000+ nonprofit organizations, and we asked questions to better understand the perspectives that charities hold in terms of the role of Canadian business in contributing to communities. So, for example, how strongly do you trust Canadian companies to make communities better? Or what are the most valuable characteristics when it comes to your corporate partnerships? And we are deep in data analysis, but we are seeing some emerging themes that you can see here. So there is a real overwhelming desire for additional resources, so contributing higher levels of money towards the sector. Improve partnership practices, so really stressing the importance of trust-based funding relationships that are long-term, so we're looking for those multi-year commitments as well as flexible. There's a desire for shared learning, and I think this is really great to really start recognizing that both the corporate sector beyond dollars and the non-for-profit sector, we both bring expertise, really unique perspectives, knowledge, and ways of working that can help amplify the impact that we co-create together. And then the last thing we heard was that relationships are highly valued. And that's one of the most important characteristics of people's corporate partnerships. So the survey results from the perception survey, it'll be released, I think, in the fall. And we'll also use the data that we have collected here to inform the evolving certification for the Caring Company program and what that looks like in terms of benefits and how we can better educate and support our corporate partners to understand the needs of the sector. So moving towards the trends. I would say that there's some interesting conversations going on out there in the corporate sector. It's kind of a low rumble. It's not a cacophony yet, but there's definitely there's a shift going on. And we're seeing that the CSR landscape, so corporate social responsibility landscape, corporate community investment, it's moving from being more transactional and ad hoc to being more strategic and integrated. So they want to work with you well as their nonprofit partners. Before I continue, I also think it's important to recognize that not every corporation is created equal. Not every nonprofit organization is created equal. We have 85,000 charities here in Canada, and there are absolutely some similarities between them. However, the size and the scope of the sector is vast. And the same holds true for the corporate sector. And I just pulled some numbers here for you. So just to give you a sense, there are in 2021, there was 1.21 million businesses in Canada. Of those, 98% are small businesses, 2% are medium-sized businesses, and only 0.2% are like the large multinationals. So that's about 2,900 businesses. It's not a lot. And so it's just good to keep this in mind in terms of there's going to be a divergence in how each company practices CSR. And the relative sophistication of their practices is going to be a product of at least 3 factors. So the first is the size of the organization. Bigger companies naturally have bigger budgets, make bigger profit margins, and therefore they have more resources to give to community. The second one is leadership. So how progressive is leadership? In one of our recent reports, we found that there is an increasing desire from especially younger people that the CEO act as an advocate to advance social justice, but that is not necessarily mainstream. So how progressive is the leadership? That is going to correspond with how much dollars are available, as well as what kind of issues they're willing to fund. And then the third one is industry. So looking at B2C, so business to consumer industries like financial services or telecom, these are industries that are more consumer facing. And so they're more likely to have CSR programs that are accountable directly to you as community stakeholders, as clients. So it's important to keep these things in mind as we move through these trends, as well as how you apply these insights to your fundraising strategies in the future. So in terms of trends, as I've said, it's a rapidly changing space, and there was lots to choose from. However, I wanted to narrow it down to 4. And you can see that these 4 are really, they were catalyzed by the tragic death of George Floyd, as well as the pandemic. And both of these occurrences, events, have really inspired companies to start doubling down on their corporate community investment, to undertake a self-reflective exercise to understand how they are giving. And again, moving beyond that, what they are giving, to also how they are giving. And so this change, or these changes, will also be reflected in the new criteria for our Caring Company program. And so the 4 trends to highlight today are social justice, impact measurement, partnerships and collaboration, as well as trust-based philanthropy. So in terms of social justice, we're seeing an increasing number of corporations making commitments to taking action on systemic issues such as racial injustice, gender inequality, 2S LGBTQI rights, ableism, etc. And this is coming through in their internal policies as well as in their granting practices. So for example, as part of this change, we're seeing an increased interest in funding smaller grassroots organizations versus mega charities. I will say the caveat on that is that it's not showing up on the data yet, but that's what I'm hearing anecdotally from corporate partners, as well as some philanthropic advisors that I've been speaking to. We're also seeing increased effort to work with BIPOC communities and changing the way they work as well. So really listening to needs and concerns and aspirations of those communities and engaging in meaningful dialogue, and ultimately translating that to action as opposed to it just being performative. And the final thing we're seeing is that corporations are now starting to evaluate DEI within the charitable organization. And I'll speak to that a bit more. So we engaged in some research with agency to really start digging deep into understanding equity when it comes to corporate community investment. This is the first piece of research in Canada to explore the influence of DEI within the corporate community investment profession, as well as beliefs, culture, and practices that either inhibit or enable equity. And this will be a link to this document or this report, as well as a second report will be shared with you after the presentation. So in terms of advancing equity between corporations and the charitable sector, there's a couple of things that we are seeing and some realities that are thankfully changing. So, there's no big surprise to everyone on this call that there is a very real power dynamic between corporations and the nonprofit sector. And that power imbalance has existed for over a century, and it's really had implications for the way that we work together as well as how we collaborate. In some cases, corporations have dictated the terms of engagement with their nonprofit partners, including determining funding priorities, setting the agenda, and in the worst case, exerting influence over operations. And so there's a real need, and I think a recognition of this power imbalance now. And we're seeing that they're taking steps to address this, which will ultimately promote greater transparency and accountability within nonprofit and corporate relations. As part of this equity piece too, also seeing that there's an internal reflection exercise going on, and nonprofits are holding corporations accountable in terms of asking some hard questions. So who is making the decisions about where a company is allocating the donations, and how are those decisions made? Are they made in camera in a closed boardroom, or is there transparency? Is there engagement? Is there collaboration? As well as how much of those dollars are given to specific nonprofit organizations. So again, are they going to the mega charities who have the budgets to build relationships and fundraise, or are they starting to shift their focus and look at more equity in terms of their grant-making processes? Then looking within the sector itself, this is the internal reflection piece for us. So corporations are moving towards expecting the same standards of DEI practices from their nonprofit partners. So questions for you to consider is, what's the diversity of your board? What does your board recruitment process look like? What's the diversity of your senior management team? Are people with lived experience involved in your program design or decision-making process? And what's the diversity of people that are served as a result of the funding you're receiving? We also found in this research that 47% of grantors in the corporate community investment space were prioritizing supporting nonprofit organizations that are led by women and Indigenous people. So we're seeing that this is translating to action in terms of who and how they want to fund organizations. So and the last thing I'll say is that Imagine Canada, we're diving a bit deeper into this through something called the Equity Benchmarking Project. And so it is looking to dig deeper into advancing or understanding how we can better advance EDI within the sector. And I believe that research is going to be released in the weeks ahead. So stay tuned. So the next trend we are seeing is increasing emphasis on impact measurement. And I think if this is implemented well, it could be a really positive change for the sector. And there are some things to keep in mind. So naturally, corporations are data-driven. And they love measuring things. And as such, they are looking for more measurement and evaluation from their community investment programs. And I think this is great because it helps our corporate partners understand what we're doing, the impact that we are co-creating in community. But more importantly, it also creates a strong business case for them to maintain existing dollars or potentially increase budgets and the amount of money that goes towards communities. And from my perspective too, another benefit of this is it is reducing the emphasis, the very, very problematic emphasis on our core funding and administrative costs, which in the nonprofit sector, corporations and funders have often looked at that as a proxy for impact, which is highly problematic. And so now we're actually shifting the lens to actually looking at impact. So that is very much a welcome change. From your side as nonprofits, this is going to require a bit of work. One of the big shifts is moving from reporting our impact as outputs to outcomes. And so I'm not an expert in this piece, and I encourage you to do a Google search. There's lots of great research and articles out there. But outputs is when you report how many meals you served, whereas outcomes is where you talk about how many lives were changed. And ultimately, how, let's say, if it was a meal program, instead of reporting how many kids ate breakfast, talking about how that then translated into them being able to stay more focused in school. And then the long-term impact would be potentially increased literacy rates. So I think this is really great in terms of the focus on impact measurement is great for you because it helps you understand where you're realizing your highest return on investment. It also gives you a signal in terms of where your programs might be underperforming and in some cases need retiring or reevaluating. And it's a great communication tool to communicate your unique value proposition to your funders in a very simple and compelling way. The other side of this, there are two sides to this. So the first is for those of you out there that are already doing great data collection and measurement, that are data savvy, it's great news. It could result in deeper impact in your community because as the saying goes, you only manage what you measure, and it could result in you impacting more funding dollars. The other side of that is for organizations that don't have the capacity, the capability to execute this work. It's a really big consideration that just some organizations, I know that having run an organization myself, dollars can be really tight and you are so focused on the mission that often the kind of impact piece is an afterthought. And so setting yourself up for success there. Because the quality, setting yourself up for success, both in terms of collecting data, but also ensuring the quality of that data is robust and rigorous. There's a saying in the kind of the scientific analysis, quantitative analysis world is garbage in is garbage out. So if your data is not rigorous, it's not going to be measuring the right things and really not demonstrating the true impact that you are having in community. So good for you out there to start thinking about how you can build capacity in this area. The third trend is partnership and collaboration. We all know that we can make an effort or we can make an impact individually, but really it's through strategic partnerships and collaboration that we can truly address the complex issues and ultimately achieve lasting change. And I wouldn't say this is mainstream yet, but we are seeing an increasing desire from corporations to want to collaborate more strategically with their nonprofit partners. So again, that's moving from the what, just the dollars, to the how. And I think this is really a welcome change. I think it's great news. No single organization has all of the knowledge, all of the answers, the skills, the financial means to tackle some of the very complex problems that we face as a community, as society. And so I think there's strength in numbers there. I also think that these collaborations really promote out-of-the-box thinking, innovation, and ultimately expanded reach. And from my experience too, when we work together, when we collaborate, when we're in true partnership, it really increases a sense of shared responsibility that we are in this together, which then opens the door for more tolerance for disrupting the status quo, testing new approaches, and failing forward together. And then the last thing that we're also hearing is that thankfully, corporations no longer want to compete on solving issues, but they actually want to collaborate with competitors in their industry, focus their resources and their attention around a single issue. And I think we're going to see much more of that in the future. So the last trend is trust-based philanthropy, which I'm sure you've heard about. And trust-based philanthropy reimagines relationships between donors, nonprofits, and communities. It's about rebalancing power and decision-making. It emphasizes trust, it emphasizes transparency, and I think it's a really empowering position for us in the sector to lead our work from this place of trust. I think it allows for more meaningful collaboration and co-creation. It really cultivates a space for open dialogue, for shared decision-making, and genuine partnerships. Trust-based philanthropy also recognizes that those closest to the issues are often in the best position to determine how to use funds effectively. And so embedded in that is the quality of flexibility. And in a rapidly changing world, we need to be flexible. We need to be agile. So with trust-based philanthropy, that flexibility comes through in terms of how funding is granted, but also how organizations allocate that funding and respond to unforeseen challenges as well as opportunities. And just to share one piece of data here. So this is from a report we did called Funders' Perspectives on Unrestricted Funding. And it demonstrates the real swing in terms of support for trust-based philanthropy and unrestricted funding. So you can see in the first months of 2020, only 3% of funding was unrestricted. Then the pandemic happened. And in the second half of 2020, first of all, donations increased significantly. I think it was by $4 billion. And of that, 26% was unrestricted. So that's a significant increase. And then the data is also showing that those funders who have decided to unrestrict their grants, nearly 93% of them anticipate keeping the changes. So I think that's really great news for the sector. So there's been a lot shared here, but I just wanted to go over just some of the opportunities for the sector. These are things that you should absolutely keep in mind. In terms of opportunities, these trends really are going to result in strengthened organizations, allowing us to do really, really good work and building in that flexibility as well as long-term commitments. A welcome shift in power dynamics, really rebalancing the power. So instead of corporations or funders dictating terms, that we're working together on equal footing. So moving from that power over dynamic to power with. Also seeing, more action, less performance towards addressing systemic issues and advancing equity and accessibility. And I think these are some of the themes that you should really be highlighting both in your work and leveraging that expertise in your fundraising efforts as well. So really showcasing that. And you can see from Kim's quote from Suncor that companies now are really looking at how to decolonize their granting processes so that they can advance equity. And then the last one is to foster collaboration, which is ultimately going to amplify impact. And I encourage you, I think we're both guilty of this, both the sector and the corporate sector. We have assumptions around how the other works, and we have stereotypes and biases, et cetera. And I encourage you to drop those assumptions, get really curious, and find common ground and collaborate more closely with them. And then there are, with any change, things to keep in mind. So always think strategically, do your research, demonstrate alignment with corporate priorities. Again, get curious about who they are, who they're giving to, what kind of change they want to see in their world. Look at some of the interviews with their leadership to see what social issues they are highlighting in the press and media. Also emphasize impact. So moving from outputs to outcomes. And looking for help if you don't know how to do that. There's some great people out there who are doing this work. The third one is embracing data. So building capacity and impact measurement. This is going to be really important in terms of attracting and maintaining your corporate partnerships. And keep in mind, this may require additional resources and expertise. So prioritize in this. If you're doing your budget for next year, start building this in. Look for ways to get funding dollars or see if you can partner with somebody. Universities are also great. There are so many PhD students out there that are really looking for an opportunity to leverage their skills. So think creatively about these things. Number 4 is anticipate change. Things are always changing. Our funding landscape is changing. How we partner is changing. The issues that we are facing are changing. And I would encourage you, I think a lot of us are so committed to the issues that we're trying to solve in community that we can be very heads down, very focused on our mission. And so every once in a while, keep your head up and keep your mind open. The 5th one is prioritizing people. I am a firm believer that relationship is the key to every success. It does nothing but enhance your partnerships and amplify your social impact. And then the last one is dissolving silos. So collaborate with everyone. If my leadership at Foundation for Social Change taught me anything, it's this. And there's no greater skill than collaboration. It can just amplify your impact and really, really make a difference to the success of your project. So at this point, I just thank you all for inviting me here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Claire. There was so much incredible information. We've got questions coming in all over the place here, so we'll get started. So we got a question from Maureen, who's asking, what are some examples of strong arguments to convince corporate prospects to partner with our charity during recession times?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like there is a buzz out there in the world that their corporations are cutting back on their funding, but I am not seeing that with any of the corporations that we're working with. And I think, the convincing is coming through your case for support. Again, speaking to some of those things that I talked about here today in terms of demonstrate your impact, demonstrate your alignment, demonstrate your need, and demonstrate how you can work together effectively to tackle that issue.
Okay, great. We got a question asking, have there been any trends identified around changing interest in employee engagement opportunities through corporate partnership and fundraising initiatives?
Absolutely, yes. And that's something I know Benevity is actually doing some interesting work here, and they have some really great resources on their website. Imagine Canada also has some great research on this, so we'll share it with you. But again, as we are in, what is it called? The Great Resignation. And companies are looking for more creative ways to retain talent and engage their employees. we are seeing more commitment and investment in employee engagement programs, creating more opportunities for volunteering, paid volunteer hours, as well as engaging employees on the selection of issues that they want corporate dollars or kind of employee matching programs to go to.
Amazing. So we got quite a few questions kind of in advance about red flags, and what are some red flags that nonprofits should look out for when forming partnerships with the corporate sector?
Oh, wow, that's a big question. Okay. Yeah, let me think about that one because I don't want to misspeak. I think it's quite hard. We're in a very hard position in the sector because it can, having fundraised, it can be hard to fundraise. And so I think the first step in that is actually doing an internal evaluation as an organization in terms of what your values are and what kind of partners you are willing to work with. I think that that's where the kind of red flag piece comes in, is what are your red flags as opposed to making it about them. So getting really clear on what you want from your partnerships, what kind of values alignment you want, where you can negotiate. So I know that some organizations, they struggle to take money from fossil fuel companies. Is that the line in the sand you want to draw? Or are you willing to be flexible there because you know the power that the impact that you can make in community with those dollars, and also find a way to kind of reconcile that tension and paradox with some of the harms that companies are committing while they are also doing good with their dollars. And this is actually something we're now leaning into at Imagine Canada. And we hope to have some thought leadership out on next year in terms of how do we wade into these murky conversations? How do we speak into some of the red flags? I think, we live in a very polarized world where people are very black and white in their thinking, and that's often where we're not going to find solutions. And there is a hard line that we need to draw. But I also feel like there are courageous conversations that need to be had where we lean in, we get curious about one another, and we start asking questions. And I think through that process, that helps you come to determine what your red flags are, because I think they're going to be very different from one to another.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And, we're seeing kind of this rise of community-centric fundraising, even outside of corporate partnerships, and thinking about those ethical considerations when you take money in whatever shape or services or whatever it may be from corporations that potentially have a reputation that isn't as, as desirable as others. And I think it's such a huge conversation. I feel like we could do a whole webinar on that. But it's a loaded
absolutely.
Question.
Yeah. And I think, it's up to us as a sector to kind of be the guiding light, to steward them forward, to maybe start reducing harm, to educating them. So again, moving away from this polarizing to actually stepping in and being okay, let's talk about this. How can we help you address some of those things? And then there are going to be hard lines that you just have decided that you don't want to cross.
I love that. I love that angle of it's an opportunity to educate. That's great. Okay, so questions are still coming in really quickly. So we have Aaron asking, are companies investing in designing impact measurement infrastructures internally, or is this a gap that the charity is expected to take the lead on? She's wondering if the trend is that not-for-profits should be nimble to plug into the funder's model or invest in developing their own M&E framework.
Yeah, I think it's an and. So I'm sure you're familiar with Benevity. And then there's also Impact Genome, which was based in the States. They've now moved to Canada. And so they are working actively at the request of corporations to build out an impact measurement framework. And what I love about their model, so I've spoken about, some of my concerns with impact measurement, and especially the burden it puts on, an already resource scarce sector, to then we have to create these things. We don't have the knowledge, expertise, or the resources. With Impact Genome, my understanding is actually some of the corporations are willing to pay for their nonprofit partners to build that capacity internally. So that is really great. I can't speak to whether that is going to be a global practice. So I think if there are opportunities for you to start building that in to your budgets, to your professional development, prioritizing it within the organization, attending free webinars, just getting a bit more savvy and literate on some of these practices around impact measurement will definitely be to your benefit. I know Tamarack does something, as well as McConnell Foundation. So there are a lot of resources out there. But ideally, I would love to see the burden of resources come from the corporate sector, because they naturally have more money. And I feel like as the nonprofit sector, we're already asked to make our dollars do so much more than they could ever do in the private sector, that it was just one more thing for us to do. And that's where kind of my optimistic hesitation comes from, that there's going to have to be some additional funding to really support people to do the impact measurement piece well.
We got a lot of questions about impact measurement. So this one is kind of related from Jennifer, from kind of asking a question about smaller charities. So she's saying, unrestricted funding and trust-based relationships seem to go against the demand funders have of measuring impact more specifically. How can we help those grassroots smaller charities that will struggle to find those resources to measure impact accurately?
Can you repeat that one more time, Meredith?
Unrestricted funding and trust-based relationships seem to go against the demand funders have of measuring impact more specifically. How can we help those grassroots smaller charities that will struggle to find resources to measure impact accurately?
Yeah, so I actually don't, that's interesting that that's how you perceive that. And I wish you were live, and so we could have more of a conversation about that. Because from when I was running my organization, I actually don't see it as being, I don't see impact measurement or data collection as being restrictive. I think it's not very realistic to expect corporations or anyone, any donor, to just give money and not see some kind of proof that their money is actually making a difference in communities. So what they're doing is they're giving you flexibility in terms of the unrestricted piece. So we're not telling you where to spend it. We're not telling you how to spend it. We're not telling you when to spend it, but we are asking for some demonstration of impact so that we know that you are managing the funds responsibly to ultimately create impact in community. And then to the smaller nonprofit piece, I totally understand the struggle there in terms of resourcing. It's really, really hard. And so that's where I would look to local organizations. So Foundations for Social Change was the organization I co-founded here in Vancouver. And we were built on data. We're an evidence-based organization. And we had the divine privilege of working with UBC. So all of our data collection was outsourced, but that's where I would encourage you to think creatively about who could help you. And universities are just a wealth of knowledge and expertise, and it's often free because grad students and PhD students are looking for opportunities to leverage their skill sets and make a difference. So I have empathy for you. I know it's really, really hard. And I encourage you to get out there and start thinking creatively and see what you can find in terms of opportunities.
Okay, great. We got a question from Jane. Jane is asking, many organizations try to support the communities that their employees reside in, but with employees moving remotely, do you expect this to change corporate giving trends?
We are absolutely seeing that change, which I think, again, is a welcome change. That language of we support communities where we live, work, and play, that is now being dropped. And we are supporting communities because, to your point, some of the employees are living more remotely. And also some of the biggest issues that we face, like climate change, doesn't have a postal code. It is everywhere. So I'm really glad to see that there is that shift happening on the side of corporations. That's also something that we're embedding in our certification for the new Caring Company program. I also just want to mention we're renaming the Caring Company program because we recognize it's very paternalistic. So stay tuned on that.
Great. Okay. So this is a question from Kyle. What's the biggest change between how corporate partners are evaluating their investment today compared to 5 to 10 years ago?
Oh, I unfortunately cannot speak to that because I was running a charity for 10 years. So I'm back in this space after a long absence. So sorry, Kyle. I encourage you to have a look online, but I would say, based on some of the things that I spoke about here, definitely presencing and advancing equity, justice, diversity, and inclusion through their work, and dismantling that power imbalance because those were very much entrenched about 10 years ago.
Great. I just want to point out, so somebody actually just kind of popped into the chat here. We have actually a corporate partner on the call today who's kind of chimed in on some of the things that we're talking about. And she says, we are trying to figure out impact reporting, but we understand the limited resources of nonprofits. So we honestly take what we can get. A quote from an impacted client, a few bullet points on your successes, the number of participants or clients that you've helped. So that's a really good insight from somebody who, you know, you would be talking to and what they're looking for. So I just wanted to make sure that that was there. Yeah, that we said that one. So the next question is, where do you believe the balance between corporate funders needing to be able to measure the impact of the projects or charities they support and being too demanding or placing too many requirements and restrictions on those they fund?
Yeah, I think it's going to be murky for a while until we find that fine balance. One thing I found interesting is corporations are also drowning in reporting. And so I think finding that kind of common sense of understanding and connection there, and just, you know, making your voices known, letting it be known that this is burdensome to us. I remember we had a government grant and it felt like a full-time job in order to fulfill all of my reporting requirements. And so I think just having those conversations, letting your funders know, you know, doing the best that you can, and also advocating for change. And we'll be doing that through some of the criteria actually in our Evolved program, because we recognize that it is a huge burden, especially, you know, if you have 10, 15 funders, that is a lot of reporting. So to whoever is from the corporate side, like, how do we standardize that? So we're actually giving all of our funders the same information and that we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And then we're also seeing, you know, some early signs that corporations are starting to decolonize their granting practices. The kind of early adopters are starting to recognize that it is incredibly burdensome for you. They're also looking at new ways to receive those reports. So instead of it being a written report, if folks prefer oral reporting, then opening an opportunity for oral reporting. So I think it's still early days, but we will see incredible shifts in this space over the years to come.
Hey, we have David asking, do you have any further thoughts on how not-for-profits can best identify good partners to amplify impact? Even when interests are aligned, it can be difficult to partner.
Yeah, I guess I would love to know more about like what makes it difficult to partner. So it's hard for me to answer that question specifically because I'd like to ask you more questions around kind of how you've come to that. But I think, you know, do your research, evaluate, you know, as much as we need the money from in terms of being someone who's running an organization, you need those fundraising dollars. I also encourage you to live into your values and be selective about who you partner with. Do your research, make sure that there's real alignment there. Leverage the heck out of LinkedIn, your connections, your community, get introductions. There's nothing that can replace a personal introduction as opposed to an anonymous grant application when you haven't had any personal contact. And I also recognize that it is a privilege to have that kind of social capital to get those introductions. But again, kind of applying that creativity. There's going to be changes coming down the line as well in terms of our Grant Connect platform that will hopefully facilitate and address some of those issues that you're talking about.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to expand on it a little bit, just because we did get another question from Elaine who's asking, other than LinkedIn and digging through company websites, how do you recommend finding the right people to contact to initiate these discussions?
Just research. I don't have any like magic answer there. Just from my experience, it is just old-fashioned research. Or if you see somebody that's not on LinkedIn, but you know, from the company's website that shows their corporate community investment team, and then looking to see like 6 degrees of separation, who can get you in touch with that person. But I don't think there is any magic formula. You could attend events as well. Networking is a really great way to get in front of people. So just again, thinking creatively, doing your research, and just leveraging the existing resources that are out there. But I wish I had like a magic formula for you, but I don't.
I know, we all wish we had that magic formula.
Yeah. No, or magic wand even. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we got another question from Elaine. So she's asking, Corporations keep telling us that they want to engage their staff and provide volunteer opportunities for them, but so far it mainly seems like they want us to deliver free team bonding activities for them. So it's a large time commitment from us and less so having the staff volunteering to benefit our charity. Do you have any advice on how to truly have staff engaged while they are volunteering and supporting our organization?
Yeah, to me, that sounds, so I'm not an expert in this space at all. So I'm just thinking off the cuff here. But I think the onus is also, it's on you as an organization to design a volunteer program that really meets your goals. And when an organization, a company contacts you to explore those opportunities, be like, yeah, and you should explain to them, like, this can be really burdensome and ends up being a free team bonding event. You can be very clear and say, you know, we're really looking to work strategically with our corporate partners to offer volunteer opportunities that make a difference. Because from my experience of managing volunteers, they are really looking to like make an impact. They want to walk away with that full heart beyond just like having, you know, a bonding experience with their colleagues. So I would say to you as an organization, that's where your power is, right? Like, you can talk till you're blue in the face to corporations and say, well, this isn't this and this isn't that, and this isn't a free team building event. But if you come to them with like, this is basically an example of what we can offer to you in terms of volunteering opportunities, this is how it allows us to meet our mission, these are going to be the impacts, I think that is a really compelling invitation to a corporation.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just thinking back to, you know, my fundraising days, and one of the organizations I worked at was actually an oncology camp. And we had a ton of, you know, corporate partners who would be interested in volunteering for us in different capacities. And I would say, like, don't assume that they're not going to want to do it. Like, we had a corporate partner, Volkswagen was a corporate partner of ours, and we literally had the CEO of Volkswagen scrubbing floors at the camp because that's what we needed, right? It's don't assume that they won't want to do it. Do exactly what Claire said, which is tell them what you need, tell them what would actually be of value, and then you can create those team building opportunities around that so that both parties are getting value from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. So, are there any trends in the best way to reach out to corporations to request funding? Does it differ greatly depending on the size of the corporation?
Yeah, I think I've kind of spoken to this, excuse me, and a few of my other answers. And from my experience, I also know that there are some there's not a lot of opportunities to engage. You often hit a website and then your email or your inquiry goes off into like the ethers and you sometimes don't hear back. So I understand that there's kind of a lot of, can't think of the word right now, a lot of gatekeepers around the corporate space. Yeah. And I don't have an answer I don't know if you have any answers there, Meredith, but I will share, like, at Foundations for Social Change, we finally got one corporate partner, but it was an in-kind corporate partner, which I'm not underestimating the value of that partnership, but it can be really hard. And I think also depending on the issues that you are working on, like we were working on adult homelessness, it's one of like the least sexy issues out there. So it can be really hard to attract corporate partners. But my practice was, do not take a no personally, just keep showing up, keep showing commitment, keep demonstrating the impact that you could have together.
Great. Okay, we got a question from, I believe it's Andrea, asking, how impactful is the program 1% for the planet? And how could we leverage this program for our corporate donors?
Yeah, I don't know much about 1% for the planet. I do know that it is 1% for the planet. I think it might be pledge-based. I'm not sure if they actually validate the data. And this focus is primarily on environmental, but beyond that, I don't know.
Okay.
I encourage you to reach out to them and find out and let me know.
Yeah, perfect. I'm seeing some conversations in the chat around like competition for funding between charities that have, you know, similar causes and kind of, I don't know if competition is the right word, but you know, they're competing essentially, yeah, for that funding from these corporate partners. Do you have any advice or recommendations on how maybe some of our friends that are on the call today could stand out?
Yeah, well, I think you could stand out by collaborating. I think, to Kim Norby from Suncor Foundation, and my personal experience too, I think when you can demonstrate that you can work together around an issue, that speaks volumes about who you are, your approach, your mindset, and your ability to make a difference. And there's the very real landscape that we live in, that there are limited dollars, and it sometimes feels like unlimited issues that we need to address together. So I think, again, kind of holding space for like, oh, this is hard and there's lots of competition, and I think we naturally fall into that scarcity mindset, and then also opening up to thinking that there are lots of opportunities out there, there's a lot of money out there, and how could we make this a more compelling invitation? Because that's really what fundraising is. Like, you're inviting someone in. If we collaborate together, if we show that actually now we have two organizations that want to work on this, because I think there is a lot of duplication in our sector too.
Yes, agreed. Okay, we have time for maybe one or two more. So if anybody has any burning questions, now's the time. So we have someone asked, an anonymous asker asked, do you find that smaller local corporate partners can be put off by national charities?
Oh, I don't have the answer to that. Having not been in a small corporation or been in a large or a charitable organization either. So Meredith, I don't know if you have any wisdom there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it kind of depends. I also don't have a ton of experience in this, but I don't think it's a blanket statement. I would say if you're sourcing a smaller kind of local partner, and if you even have eyes on that person, chances are that your organization is activating in that small community in some way, right? If these people are even on your radar. So, bring stories from your community, bring, stats and data about how you're investing and how it's impacting and the people within your community, and give it a shot. I would say never be turned off because you're a local organization. There is, value in all of these partners, and it's about kind of making that story for how you're working within the community.
Yeah, and you inspired just a thought, and it's something I mentioned in the presentation again. It's about relationship, whether that person's embedded in a big organization or a small organization. If you prioritize the connection, the relationship, the partnership, get curious, you get to know that person. I think when we kind of refer to these schemas of like big corporations, small charities, we fall into mindsets, biases, and prejudices about how people operate or work. And so I think my experience has been dropping into curiosity, and just showing up has been a much better approach.
Yes, agreed, for sure. Okay, we have only a couple minutes left. So this is going to be I always like to kind of end it with this question. Chances are the people on the call today are going to kind of take things back to their team from today, and share what they've learned. So if you were to pick kind of maybe the top two things that you hope everybody on this call can take back to their team today, what would they be?
Impact measurement. I just can't stress enough how important that is going to be. And I think, if you don't prioritize it, you stand the chance of being left behind. And this is something I didn't speak to, but I think it's really, really interesting. And I'm not an expert, but I have attended a couple of webinars on the power of AI to support the sector. I can't think of the organization, but there's AI for funders and AI for nonprofits. I encourage you to watch both of them and leveraging those tools to your advantage, getting kind of savvy with those things, and just taking a moment again to kind of lift your head up from your mission and like have a look around to see what's going on out here in the more kind of conceptual world. Because I think there's some interesting things coming down the pipe. And again, with the AI piece, I think we're going to get left behind if you're not leveraging those tools.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that you brought that up. I saw somebody earlier mention ChatGPT in the chat. These things are, huge. They're not going away. They're only probably going to continue to grow and impact our sector. We actually did a blog on how nonprofits can use AI and ChatGPT in their fundraising. So I would encourage everybody to check it out. And I love that you brought it up, because I think it's time to really start like becoming a little bit more comfortable. We don't all have to dive head first into the world of AI if we're not ready, but it's time to start kind of understanding how it could impact the sector as a whole and your organizations. We have somebody asking where we can find the webinars that you mentioned. So I think we can probably include those in the follow-up email. We'll send out links to them so that you can all access them. But that concludes the session for today. So thank you so much again, Claire, everybody for attending. This was an incredibly engaged audience, which means that there is an immense amount of value in what you presented today. So thank you so much. Before we go, I do just want to let everybody know that there will be a very brief survey that will pop up right after the session. Should take you only about 20 seconds. So we would greatly appreciate hearing your feedback. I hope you will all take a moment to fill that out. But that's it for us today. So thank you again, Claire. Thank you everyone for joining. Check out more of the Keelabs webinars on our website. And we hope to see you at another webinar in the future.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.